Hello folks, my name is Mark, this is Why I Hate the World. How you guys doing? So there's been a large wave of accusations, sexual assault, sexual harassment accusations that have come out against some very powerful people. And it seems like the catalyst was Harvey Weinstein last month. You know, multiple women came out against this guy, accusing him of rape, of sexual misconduct, you know, and that kind of thing. And it's sort of just, that was the leak in the dam, and everything just broke, and now there's a flood of, you know, accusations, and women are coming forward, people who were too scared before are coming forward and making their, you know, telling their stories. And that's a great thing. And I think that kind of signifies a sea change in the way that our country perceives and this, you know, this type of crime, right? Because in the past, it hasn't always been that way. You know, like today, we're tending to believe it when somebody makes an accusation. When a woman makes an accusation against a powerful man, it seems that the default now is to believe it. Believe what she says, right? In the past, that's not how it was. You know, like think about when Bill Cosby, you know, the accusations first came out against Bill Cosby. And first it was one woman, right? Did you believe it? You know, well, most people didn't. Most people saw it and said, you know, he's a famous person, a powerful person, right? There's no reason for him to do this kind of thing. And they thought that, you know, this person, this woman who was making this accusation, it's probably a ploy to get money, you know, out of him. And then, you know, another one came forward, and another one came forward, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 women, you know, I think it was something like 17, ended up being 17 women coming forward saying that he either, like, you know, acted inappropriately, or in some cases straight up raped them, you know, drugged them and stuff like that, you know. And after so many, it becomes pretty obvious that it's true, right? And I think the change that's happening now is that it doesn't take that, you know, it doesn't take multiple women anymore to drive the point home. It's like now people are seeing that when one person comes forward, we should take it at face value. And that's a great thing. You know, that's something that's really needed in this country. You know, you shouldn't automatically discount, you know, the accuser in cases like this, right? Because that's what was basically happening before, you know. So there's one thing I want to kind of comment on here. This is kind of how it's been for everybody else in the country who isn't rich or powerful or the boss, you know. If you're just a normal guy, normal person, and you work in a, you know, for a corporation or a company or something, right? And somebody makes this kind of claim against you, like, let's not even talk about rape, let's talk about sexual harassment, because rape is different. Rape is the law, you know, you'll go to jail and shit like that, right? Sexual harassment you won't go to prison for, but it'll ruin your career. That's what'll happen, right? So if you're not the boss, if you don't have the ability to, you know, if you're not somebody who the corporation has the company or whatever has an interest in protecting, then they'll just basically fire you in an instant. Especially if you're like a contractor type person, if you're like in a contractor role, you're not a permanent employee, you know, of whatever, you don't have benefits, that kind of thing. If you just work like, you know, as in a contractor type role, they'll just, you know, you're gone. That's it, you know, because they don't want to deal with that kind of thing. It makes the company look bad, and the course of action is to just, you know, 9 times out of 10, you're out of there, right? But if you're not, right, if you're an actual permanent type person, you know, it can ruin you, right? Even, you know, an accusation can ruin you, even if there's nothing behind it. You know, just the act of a woman, like, you know, claiming that you acted inappropriately towards her can basically ruin your career. You know, you'll end up getting fired, and then when you try to get another job, that comes up in the background check, and you ain't getting a new job, and you're going to end up your career in that field is over with, you know. And that's kind of how it's been for, you know, as long as as in my experience, forever, you know. And it's kind of cool to see that the rich and the powerful are no longer going to be protected from that, you know, because that's like, You know, I think actually TJ Kirk said this in one of his videos. Like in Hollywood, for example, it's kind of so well known that this kind of thing happens that it's become like a joke almost, you know. The sleazy kind of, you know, producer who uses the casting couch and takes advantage of women in order to, like, you know, cast them in his movies and stuff. Right. And I mean, it can only, you know, I'm sure a million people out there have anecdotes of this kind of thing happening in their chosen industries as well. And so it's kind of good to see that this sort of protection, this privilege that the 1% class, you know, they don't have that anymore. That's like good, right? It's about goddamn time. There is one thing though, one other thing I want to add before we sign off here, is that we need to make sure that it doesn't go too far in the other direction. Now, what do I mean by that, right? Well, so, you know, you'll hear now from, you know, feminists and social justice people and stuff now that in a case like this, a case of sexual harassment case or rape or something, that you should believe the woman, you know, should be your default position, right? And I think we need to be careful that it doesn't go so far that you condemn the male, you know, without an investigation, right? What that means to me is that the woman should no longer just be automatically discounted. You know, the police or the authorities. You know, in the case of sexual harassment, it would be the management. You know, in the case of rape, it would be the police. They should proceed as if the woman is reporting it in good faith, and a decent investigation will uncover if it is, you know, a false accusation or a valid accusation. And that's how it should go, right? So, you know, you got to remember, in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty, right? And we can't allow it to become that, you know, if there's just like a powerful man that somebody doesn't like, they can just make a accusation against him and ruin him. We have to make sure that doesn't happen, right? So I have a story that I'd like to tell here, though. It's the same story that I had in my bullying video that I made about 3 years ago. And it's because the same thing applies here. And so what happened was, about 8 years ago, we hired a girl that, you know, a woman that I worked with at a prior job. Right. I'm not going to tell you who I work for or, you know, my company or anything like that, but, you know, we create software, right? And this person, you know, was cool. I knew her from the prior gig, but it's not like we were best friends or anything. But, you know, I talked to her once or twice, so we hired her, you know, it was cool. And everything kind of worked pretty well for a little while. And then what ended up happening is that her work habits began to deteriorate, because the place where I work at is the office environment is extremely cool. You know, you basically, there's no stupid rules. You know, there's no one looking over your shoulder. You don't have to check in and clock in or any crap like that. You wear what you want as long as it's not, you know, business casual. But most, you know, you wear a t-shirt and jeans, nobody gives a shit, right? And it's very results oriented. Basically, you know, if you do your job, if you deliver, right, if you get the work done, then nobody cares what you do. Nobody cares when you come and go or what you look like. It's very cool, right? It's very, very, you know, results. That's all I care about, right? And she basically just started abusing the privilege. Like when she realized that nobody was going to get on her for this kind of thing, she started taking advantage of that and started coming in late, you know, all the time, right? Like 9:30, 10, 10:30, every single day, right? Not once in a while, every single day, right? Started taking lots of days off, right? Now, this person had a couple of medical problems, so, you know, a day off here and there where you need it and you're going to the doctor and stuff, not a problem at all, right? Every single week, you know, 2-3 times a week, that's a problem, okay? There was a month where she was out for 8 days. Okay, 8 days in a month. It's like, what do you have, fucking cancer or something? You know, that's not acceptable, right? No place is gonna like let that go unless you have like serious problems, you know. And she didn't, okay? She didn't have any life-threatening diseases or whatever, right? And it was basically it was a lie. It was bullshit, you know? Right. I mean, there were days where she would email us, you know, it was like, I remember one time it was 10:30, right? And she emailed us and said, there's too much traffic. I'm not coming in today. I'm working from home, right? And when, you know, work from home is basically a code word for I'm not working today and getting paid for it. And it was like, great, you know, that's all it took was fucking too much traffic. I'm not coming in. And the quality of her work started suffering for it, right? Now, I wasn't this person's manager. Okay, that is to say, I couldn't fire her or discipline her, right? But I was the team lead in charge of, you know, and I was in charge of handing out assignments, and I had to meet certain goals. Basically, I had to make sure the work got done for my team, right? And she wasn't fucking doing any work. But I didn't have any direct power to discipline her. All I could do was go by and ask her to fucking work. You know, can you get this done, please? When is this going to be finished? That kind of thing, right? I couldn't go up and say, you're going to get fired if you don't straighten up or whatever. I couldn't do that, right? All I could do was go to my manager and tell him that, you know, this person is not performing and leave it to him. And he never did anything about it, right? For whatever reason, you know. And I was basically in a rock and a hard place, you know. So it started deteriorating, you know. And keep in mind that for the first like 3 months, everything was cool. Like me and this woman, we even hung out a couple of times, you know. Everything was totally cool, you know. She worked well, she did her job well, and it was like it just started going downhill. When she realized that she could get away with it, this is how she started acting, right? And so 6 months later, she's basically like, you know, telling me to get lost every time I try to get her to actually do some work, you know. Basically just saying like, you know, refusing, not answering my emails, you know. We used to use instant messenger back then because that's how long ago this was. You know, basically ignoring me when I would message her, and then I'd go to her desk and she'd be there and it's like, oh yeah, I didn't see it, whatever. Just shit like that. And it's like, no, man, that's not cool, right? But there was really nothing much I could do about it except complain, and my complaints weren't being addressed. So we started getting in arguments, you know. Basically every time I would ask her to do something, she would be snarky, tell me to fuck off, right? Stuff like that. And one of the arguments, she dropped a really big hint that if I didn't, like, stop trying to get her to work, right, that she was going to accuse me of sexual harassment. That's basically, there was a huge fucking hint, you know, and I got it. I got the hint, you know. And, you know, and I was like, okay, message loud and clear. All right, you win, you know, and I backed off, okay. I basically stopped trying to get her to work, right. I stopped fucking handing her assignments. I was like, just forget it, you win, you know, because I didn't want to get fired. Because that's exactly what would happen, you know. Exactly what would happen is that she would go to whatever, you know, HR person, and, you know, I was a contractor at the time, and I'd be gone. The end, right? So the work still had to get done, and she wouldn't do it, so I ended up doing her work for her, right? Because I had goals I had to meet, I had deliveries that had to be, you know, I had to actually deliver when the date came, right? And work had to get done somehow, and she wasn't doing it, so somebody had to do it, and that was me. So basically my workload doubled and shit. You know, I ended up doing her work, I ended up covering for her, right? And I couldn't get any decent work out of her. And whenever she actually did do something, I would get complaints back that it wasn't right, stuff like that. And I was just like, fuck it. And I was in between a rock and a hard place. There was nothing I could do about this. And my immediate manager didn't do anything about it. And it was like, you know, I complained to him, and then he told me he'd handle it, and he never would. And it was like, I don't know, right? So eventually things came to a head, and this is what happened. My manager told me to tell her to do something, right? To give her a task, right? And I knew she wasn't going to do it. And I knew at this point, even me asking her to do it, she was going to give me a load of a ration of shit just for asking. You know, she was going to jump down my throat for it. So what I did is that I got it in an instant message. Because, you know, once again, that's how old this is. And I got an instant message conversation going, and I invited all the other people in the group, in my team, to be in this instant message so they could all see it, right? And I asked her to do the task, and she lost her shit and went off on me, and, you know, basically telling me to fuck off in so many words, right? And just very unacceptable response. And then she finally begrudgingly accepted to do it, right? And I got all that, you know, I got her response in that instant message and exported that and brought it to my boss, right? And it eventually went to higher management, right? Who were still too chicken shit to fire this girl, right? They still wouldn't fire her after all of this, okay? But what they did is they transferred her away out of my group. So they basically said, okay, she's not doing any work for you anymore. You can't work with her, that's it. And I was like, thank God, finally, right? Finally that shit was over with. And, you know, so now I didn't have to cover for her anymore. I didn't have to do any work for her anymore, all of that stuff, right? The end. And within another 4 months, she got herself fired because there was nobody doing her work for her, right? Nobody covering for her ass, right? And suddenly everybody noticed how late she would come and how many days she would take off and that she didn't actually fucking do anything, and she ended up getting fired, right? That's how I handle that. And the thing is, that's just, you know, it shouldn't have to be that way, right? It shouldn't have to be like that. You should be able to, you know, have proper management controls and blah, 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 blah. But this is the reality, you know. This is, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this at all. Like, the reality is that if I would have stood up to her and if she would have made a false sexual harassment claim, I would have been fired. Right. There wouldn't have been, you know what the investigation would have been? Pack up your shit, you're gone. That's the investigation, all right? Now, it's different when you're fucking somebody who's rich and powerful, you know, and it's good to see. I'm happy to see that they're no longer going to be able to get away with that kind of thing. But I just want to say, you know, just wanted to relate my personal experience with this so that everybody knows that we can't allow it to go too far in the other direction, right? That kind of thing actually does happen. Okay, I mean, it may be rare, I don't know, okay, but it actually does happen, and so when there's an accusation, there needs to be an investigation afterwards, right? Especially in the workplace, you know, there needs to be proper, you know, investigation happening after it, and, you know, don't discount the woman immediately, but don't convict the man without investigation, is what I'm saying, and I think that's a very fair stance to have, right? So, anyway, got to wrap this up, folks. It's kind of good to see, though. I just wanted to, before we leave, one last thing I want to say is that it's kind of cool to see that our society has kind of hit an extra step in its evolution. You know, that's kind of what we're seeing here. Our society is it's evolved, you know, and it's very rare that you can identify that moment when something like this happens. You know, I think the only other time in my life is like when we had a societal sea change like this is probably sometime in the 80s when it became unacceptable to say the N-word out loud, you know. I think that was probably it. And it's good to see that, you know, despite all of the ridiculous racist shit that's going on and the alt-right and guys like Roy Moore and you know, and Trump, and despite all of this pushback from the social conservatives and the racists and the misogynists and things that are happening in our society, we're still kind of evolving upwards, and that's good to see. We're still progressing. And one day, you know, in the far future, we all might actually be truly equal. Anyway, that's all I got, folks. Adios.